Welcome to the Journos on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. I'm Peter Martin. Hugh McDonald is here alongside Alison McConnell. And of course, I'm delighted to say Moira Gordon is here as well as our special guest. So lots to talk about, including Bayern Munich against Celtic. We will also look at the great Patrick Barclay, one of the great journos in the UK, who sadly passed away at the age of 77. As ever with Alison on the programme, I always like to annoy the life out of her with a top 10. So we've got the top 10 songs sung by footballers or written exactly for a football club. We'll get that in the mix, as well as St Tommy. But yeah, it does, doesn't it? 10? Yeah. Oh, don't worry, I could have about 30 of them, believe me. We'll also talk about St Tommy Burns and David Moyes at Everton. So lots to get our teeth into. Of course, Bayern Munich 1, Celtic 1 ultimately means that Brendan Rodgers' side bow out of the Champions League. But boy, Hugh, what a night it was for Celtic. They can leave the Champions League with their head held high, surely.
I think so, and I think we've watched draws away from home where you're battling under siege, and you say, "Oh, we got out of that." But I thought Celtic, in long spells, played really mature, sort of controlled, disciplined football. I thought the basic difference in the levels was that they just didn't take their chances, and if you could imagine if Harry Kane had been playing for Celtic in that first 20 minutes, I think Celtic would have scored. But that's what it is. And the only other thing that is the takeaway from it is Brendan Rodgers is always saying he's building a team. And if you looked at that team, you would have said already, you'd say that team can play in the Champions League. We're not going to win it or anything like that, but that team can play in the Champions League. The big problem from Brendan Rodgers is what happens in the summer, because other people will look at that team and say, "Do you know what, there's a few in there that we would like."
Okay, let me then take a little different slant on it and put the spanner in the works for us all to discuss. For me, I think it was redemption for Brendan Rodgers ultimately, because I think when you look at his first period and when he was brought back to get Celtic to the knockout stages, and I think he's achieved that. Has he made them a better side in Europe? I think he's managed that. I think he's proved that he's learned his lesson from the mauling of Dortmund to the credible performance. I thought it was an excellent performance by Celtic, the best I've seen away from home in many a day watching Celtic in European football. So I think from that point of view, ultimately, great coach, put a good team together, played football the way that the Celtic fans want to see. But ultimately, I think the only negative throughout the whole game and the campaign is you cannot sell your best striker in the transfer window and not replace him. It derailed Brendan Rodgers.
I think that's the thing. I think that was the question people were asking last night. Would it have been different if Kyogo had stayed? And you look at it, as Hugh says, there were chances there was opportunities. So if he had stayed, would they be through? There's a very good argument for that. You will never know for definite, but there's an argument. And I think Celtic fans will look at that and think that's a missed opportunity there if they had replaced. And it's not always easy to replace with a really top quality striker in January, but you don't let somebody go, that's there and providing those sort of finishes for you. So I think that is something that Celtic will be under scrutiny. If that opportunity, that sort of scenario came up again next year and they were in the same position, I'd be interested to see whether they'd actually sell their player or whether they'd hold on to them.
It's the one chink in the armour, Ali, because he's proved to everyone when the criticism was flying at him against Dortmund, he's proved that he can go to plan B. He's learned his lesson. He was there to get them to a knockout stage. He's achieved that. He deserves all the praise as a manager. And you have to read into what he said at various times in his press conferences about the need, the desire to make them better.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt. You look at the bench last night and you think this is where Celtic have to invest. You need a stronger squad. You need the depth to maybe go a bit further. In terms of the Kyogo one, I don't know. I think it's very difficult. I think when you've got a player who doesn't want to be there, who I think from the summer had wanted to go and be in a different kind of environment. He wants to get himself back into that World Cup squad. There's a tournament coming up that he wants to be part of. I think realistically, I think there was an offer on the table to double his salary. I think it's very difficult, realistically, to say we're not letting you go. And I get the point of then not having a striker lined up. And I think we all thought when Celtic were prepared to allow Kyogo to go that there was a replacement already lined up, that you anticipate that there is a move for someone to come in. The minute that gets a green light, the expectancy is, here's what we've got. Whether that was a loan with an option to buy or whether it was a short-term solution, you expected something to be there. And I think something probably was in the pipeline, because the weekend before the window closed, I think Celtic were at Motherwell and Brendan Rodgers spoke. He almost said we're just about there with it. So I think that's a failing in terms of the recruitment system and where it is at the minute at Celtic. However, I do think realistically it's very difficult to keep a player who doesn't want to be there. I think, especially when there's a financial offer on the table for him, that is as lucrative as what it was.
I never thought I'd use a line from a Star Trek movie, but the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, Moira.
Yeah, I never had you down as a Star Trek geek, really.
When Spock's dying, I'm traumatised.
Oh, you're still crying at the
Quick,
thought of it.
get in the chamber and save him. Come on, Kirk, what are you doing? But I just, it's one of those classic lines. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. I'm sorry. I just do not buy into it. I mean, at the end of the day, they're going to bank 40 million. I think in excess of that, because of the money that we get from gates, the money they get from the revenue associated with it, all the hospitality. It's a huge figure. And the manager is not kidding anybody. We have watched him and listened to him, and what he doesn't say is, it's chilling. In the last few weeks, you get him what he wants for a one-off game. Nobody expected them to beat Bayern Munich. No. To see the way they played in the Allianz was unbelievable. I just thought the manager could hold his, puff his chest out and say, this is what I'm capable of with the right players. And he made some big decisions last night, Moira.
You could see that even post-match when he was chatting. He was a guy who knew he was leaving. They'd lost and he was upset at that, but he knew he was walking out there, 10 foot taller and with a much stronger bargaining position if it comes to the same time next year, because, he knows that was one of the best performances away from home, as you said, and as Hugh said, to do it with the composure they did. It wasn't a back-to-the-wall plucky defeat. It was, it was actually, they went there to one of the best teams in Europe and they looked like they were going to get a result.
Looked like a European team.
Yeah,
they
did look comfortable there. Yeah, they didn't look like the wee underdog that everybody was, you sit there and you think, oh, they did okay, but they actually looked like they were genuine, contenders and entitled to be there and entitled to be where they were right up into that final stage of the match, Yeah,
I'm going to talk about various instances within the game, Hugh, but as an overview, which we are all looking at the moment, Feyenoord knocked out Milan. Mm-hmm. Bruges battered Atalanta. I am saying to you, I'm not suggesting for a minute, I mean, I know people will dissect and say, okay, this is what the budget Bruges have, this is what the budget Feyenoord have, this is what they're getting in television revenue, the whole thing. There is a counter-argument to dismantle everything. But as an overview, based on the way Brendan Rodgers' side played against Bayern Munich in the Allianz, is it a nonsense to suggest that they cannot compete? Is it a nonsense for him to suggest I can make Celtic better to the point where they can get to another knockout stage with better players, Hugh?
Absolutely not. And it's not even an argument, because you just have to look at the last performances against both Feyenoord and Club Bruges. I think Celtic beat Feyenoord at Celtic Park and drew with Club Bruges. Mm-hmm. So Club Bruges, by the way, are the story of the week. If we take parochialism out of it, you look at that, because I think Atalanta, I don't think will win Serie A, but they'll come pretty damn close to it. And Club Bruges is the kind of club who you could be looking at and say, well, what are they doing right and what are we not quite doing? And that's backed up with watching them at Celtic Park. I mean, I walked out at Celtic Park and and said to myself, there was a lot of moans. Oh, it was only one each. I was convinced that was a 0.1 rather than 2 points dropped that night. That was a 0.1 for me. I thought Bruges were absolutely top notch. So yes, I think you're right to say that Celtic can look at that and compete. The big problem is, Brendan talks about building a side, etc., and he's always talked about building a side. But inherent to Celtic's strategy is losing players. I mean, like, if you looked at that 11 last night, just 11, and then you said you've got Tierney coming back, you've got Bernardo coming back, from injury. Ida was on the bench. You've got a substitute goalkeeper on the bench. You're saying, well, by the way, we're getting pretty, one or two, a new midfielder and another winger. We're getting to a stage. But the problem is that come summer, somebody will go. Because that's the strategy.
Yes. If you're a Celtic manager, you're playing Jenga almost, because
exactly.
there are key pieces removed all the time, and your challenge is not just to then plug that gap, but to continue building. It's very difficult.
That's why I think this January window is always very heightened, because clubs are in the midst of the season and everybody's we're going to get relegated, are we going to win the league? So it's always very heightened. But the January window for Celtic wasn't an immediate thing for me. The January, even though the Kyogo thing and all that, Peter, I think strategically the thing was to get somebody in who might help you in the knockout stage. If you get a Wiesgarden in, you might have, but you bed them in so that by the time summer goes and say Khun goes, you say, well, so we're not desperate for a front three.
Yeah,
We'll
look, my only thinking of Brendan Rodgers, you can separate the mindset of a board to the mindset of a manager and his.
sometimes have to.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. You can do that, and I understand some people saying, okay, we're not going to push out 14 million for Wiesgarden at this point. But the key issue here is you've got a team where he's saying to himself, we've got a real chance here of bringing in a striker to replace Kyogo. I think it was a huge mistake, and I think they're rightly open to criticism for it. And you say to yourself, he's got to bed in. He might not hit the ground running, if he's eligible to play. But you do what Brendan Rodgers did, Moira, last night. He said, I could get an hour out of Jota. I can get an hour out of him. So at 15 minutes to go, I don't know about you, but with 15 minutes to go in that game last night, with no Kyogo or nobody to convert that ultimate chance that they had in the game, I'm thinking, when's the Bayern Munich goal coming?
Yep.
That's all I could think of. I thought there's a goal coming, and it's coming for Bayern Munich. It's not coming for Celtic because they've given their all. The tank's empty.
The thing is, if you're thinking that, and that's the thing, footballers aren't daft. Even the guys within the team will be looking around at teammates and thinking, right, which are the guys round about me that might be the one, if I can break down this attack from Bayern and get it forward, who's the one that's putting in the net for me, or where are they at different... You have to have options. You can't just have one player there to do that, because smart teams play them out the game then, so you're limiting your opportunities. So players know that, and I think that then plays on the mindy players as well. Subconsciously they maybe sit a bit deeper, or they're a bit tired and their minds start thinking, God, are we going to stay in this? We need to try and do it now. So it affects the mindset of players in the final stages of matches as
Plus,
well.
of course, the opposition's strong and they can come back and
But
crank it up. But you look at look at the chances, Moira, right? There was one chance that I looked at and I thought, my God, that's a Kyogo chance. And it was the brilliant move that Engels is in. And he sweeps it across. And that is a Kyogo style pass. It's the one that he eats up in the 6-yard area, isn't it, you?
Absolutely.
Listen, hindsight's a wonderful thing. You're saying, okay, we're looking and saying maybe he could have been there. And just my point is, 99, and this is where I hope some people don't lose the context of it, because we know what it's like in this country for people who just can't take things in context. But the manager deserves 100% credit. The players deserve a pat in the back, 100%. But I just feel he was let down by the point of whether you keep Kyogo in and say, listen, you're getting your move in the summer because our need is greater, or the other aspect of it, which is quite simply, you go and you get someone.
I agree totally. I mean, I'd love to have known what went on in the last couple of days of the transfer window, because as Alison said, I watched on television that Brendan Rodgers interview, and I saw he's got somebody in. There'll be somebody at Ross Hall Monday morning, I mean, he was very confident. And if you say to yourself, would Celtic have been better last night if they hadn't sold Kyogo? Absolutely, no brainer. The thing about Celtic last night is, and I say that, is that Brendan Rodgers used 2 substitutes last night in a draining night in the Alliance. Brendan Rodgers is a 5 substitute man.
Yes.
He's a 3 sub man at 60 minutes, and he's usually a 2 sub man 80 minutes, whatever game's going, to hold the game or not. So in the biggest match of Celtic season, the toughest match of Celtic season, he used 2. Now he's got that was a team. I'd love to see the stats are running for that team last night, because that was a team that worked last night. So I think that tells you everything. You know, you see a 5-sub man uses 2 subs when he knows. I mean, if you and I, all due respect, are sitting saying, well, Celtic are running out of legs here, I think Brendan Rodgers is looking at that and saying, very much so, you know. He might just know a bit more about football, and he's obviously even getting scientific stuff put into his ear about guys going into his own. So, yeah, absolutely. I thought that's where, and I think the big challenge will be in the summer. They'll get a centre forward, then they'll get another striker in. I think who's in the departure lounge?
Hatate.
Yep. But is Khun in the departure lounge too? I think Hatate.
I think Johnston's a huge one.
And
I think Alistair
the only
Johnston's-
thing I think about Alistair Johnston, and I think Johnston will go, but I think Johnston is very happy and not making waves. He's got a new contract, so he's got his wages bumped up. I think there'll be the whisper in the ear that, see, if Carmack goes, you're getting the band, which might mean something to that kind of character. You might get the armband. I think he'll go eventually. But I'm just wondering, that rather than just selling one in the window, do they say if somebody comes in with... Khun's now been looked at by big... That's a fact. I know this, that Khun's been looked at by big clubs. Khun's looking at clubs that are in the 20 to 30 million, even take the chance thing. Oh, you know, we'll take a punt on somebody for 25. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's in that bracket. And Hatate won't get that. But if Hatate goes, I think Celtic fans would just thank him very much and say, right, we can bolster up in the midfield.
Yeah.
I think Khun would be the bigger worry.
The bigger question as well, Celtic need to play a playoff. You're not going straight into the Champions League next season, so you've got to qualify. Those playoff games can be fraught.
They can be fraught, but the difference now that I see in a Celtic side, Alison, the way he's building it, is they are high intensity, high work rate, high press, and they understand the mechanics of it. The manager's older and wiser, and to his great credit, I would suggest to you also he's shown a modicum of humility, which is not something you associate with Brendan Rodgers. He's shown a modicum of humility to say, listen, I got that woefully wrong. I'm going to change and adapt this side to sit in when we don't have that ball and try and learn the lessons of Dortmund. And I think this time around with the team that he's got, you're right, he could lose 2 players. But the players that he's going to buy are fitting into an ethos that's easier to fit into with 8 players who know the drill.
I think the biggest compliment you could probably give him is that they look like a very well coached side, Celtic. I agree with you, you're bringing players into an established philosophy and system. It's very clear how Celtic play. I think the fact is they have money, they're in a robust health financially, that they don't need to sell players. However, I think if offers come in, the likes of Hatate, I think will be thinking, you know, I've probably stayed a season longer than I ever expected to. I don't think it'd be a huge shock.
No, I think
for someone
Hatate's
like that to
probably
go.
been told as well.
Give us
another season. You're the next one in there. And that's fair enough, because fans will go on and on, oh, what are you selling players for? A lot of the reasons, not maybe in Hatate's case, but it'll be part of Hatate's case. But a lot of players are coming to Celtic because they know Celtic will sell them on.
It's part of actually the marketing. Come here, look what we do
Don't
for
go to,
players.
say Engels, don't go to don't go to Heidenheim, don't go to such and such. Come to us, because what we do is we sell players on to the English Premier League, which presumably is where Engels, for example, wants to go. So it's part of the strategy. And it's a great strategy, and everybody applauds it when they see it in the bottom line in the financial figures. But it's painful for fans and manager when they see the players leaving, because...
But it's an easier sell one, isn't it?
The recruitment bit is huge, though. It is part of the philosophy, and it's a massive part in bringing them to Celtic compared to other clubs in Europe, possibly that would be in the same, bidding war for them. So bringing them in and selling them on is part of it, but you have to do it when it suits Celtic as well. It can't just be because a player fancies it now or because there's X amount on the table. You have to make sure there's a ready-made replacement there, ready to come in, and make sure that they're coming in ready to hit the ground running as well. Because again, you're saying, they're coming into a set philosophy, but you still need players to be up to speed in it. You still need them. We've seen what happens with Scottish clubs if they go into it thinking this is the easy tie and we'll gather pace as we're going. These playoffs are early doors. You don't have time
Maybe
to
your first
get
game of
into
your
it.
season.
Other things
Yeah, you've got to make sure everything's in place, everything's ready, and not scramble around at the end of a window trying to fill a gap because somebody's left.
Another
It
thing
has
is
to be
players are
seamless.
human beings as well. So they don't just come in and they've got families to move in, schools to find.
New
houses,
cultures,
new
new-
cultures. and that.
yeah.
I mean, I looked at the weekend and in the Eredivisie team of the week, you know, when you've got Feyenoord, they've got Barkas in goal and Lagerbielke at centre half. And no, people would say, well, and you say, well, see if you think that's wrong. Khun was labelled a dud not even a calendar year ago. Now people are talking about him. They're just, you know, they can have their, I think, you know, was it Khun had a
Wisdom
wisdom
tooth issue, yeah.
And I think Barker's just
It's just
wrong
difficult
movie.
from the outer.
But I mean, because they're human beings.
Okay, you've given me the chapter and verse and people settling in. Let me flip that for you and say, you signed for Celtic. Okay, here's your Loudhailer back. You're playing left back. You don't need to fit in. You know what you've got to do, Kieran. Just get in there, right? So that's an easy fix, isn't it, Moira?
That's the thing, when you're bringing people in, that is one that's is simpler. But again, you've got to make sure you're staying fit.
Jota-
There's no niggles, you know.
By the way, Jota's proved that, Peter.
Yeah.
And the stunning thing about Jota coming back was I thought last night Jota was absolutely superb.
Yeah.
Absolutely superb. Real top elite player. Not just in his dribbling, but he's coming back. His pace, his work rate, his closing down. You say, he's not played for
18
8
months.
months.
Which is why the manager got an hour out of him. Just as a footnote to that for all of you here. You know, McGregor, what a chance. Couldn't get a good purchase on it. Engels to Maeda, screaming out. Maeda's lob. Maeda diving header. Khun goal. I mean, that's in the Allianz Arena. The commentator at one point suggested there are some teams that come to the Allianz Arena and don't have any chances. So I thought that was, the manager deserves credit. Kane had a deflected shot, he hit the bar. Kimmich shot wide. Goretzka had a great save out of Schmeichel, and Alphonso Davies's goal is agonising. Overall, what's your overall view then? Chance to build on it? Can they compete? Tremendous optimism. What would you sum it all up for?
I was very impressed. I was at the game at Celtic Park and I watched the game closely last night. And there was spells, when you look back over there was spells where I think Celtic were much too passive, as Brendan Rodgers pointed out, in the first half against Bayern. And I was sceptical about that. I said, that's all right seeing you're passive. But look at that front four you're playing against. But I think the great thing about Rodgers is he's an elite coach, no doubt about that. But is that he learns. See the amount of times that Celtic maybe outplayed in the first half in the Champions League and suddenly, well, they're a lot better in the second half. That's not a coincidence. I think he spots things and changes them. So yeah, I think they've got a team now that can go into the Champions League with some optimism and look at. I think they would be disappointed now not to A, get into the Champions League, and B, not to get to the playoffs.
Moira?
No, I'm similar. I think I've been really impressed with the way they have evolved throughout this campaign and actually grown and almost taken their place, like they believe that they're entitled to be there. And that's not just through false optimism, it's through hard work in the training pitch, adapting to different styles, adapting to different ways of playing it. And actually, I think they've really matured throughout this campaign. I think more than probably any other campaign I've actually seen them in Europe, there's been a major shift in the way they've matured and thought about the games and, you know, approached them. And I think that gives cause for optimism if they can keep that recruitment right, because there will always be turnover at a club like Celtic, so you've got to make sure the recruitment, the people coming in. But I think Brendan Rodgers has been smart in it, but he's also obviously got smart players because you can coach them to try and change. But we've all known managers who have torn their hair out trying to get players, you know, to adapt and change, and they were one-trick ponies. And these guys obviously aren't. He's got intelligent players in there who are willing to absorb the messages coming from a coach who's smart and realise that they have to adapt to a style. And it's not easy doing that when you're going to Europe, having dominated domestically so easily, you know, to then go and shift it, and they've done it. And I think that's a real mark of what can happen going forward now as well.
And I'll leave the last word with you, Lieutenant Uhura.
At least they never called you Spock.
That's a good point, Moira.
Just covering my ears.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think what you've seen is a maturity of Celtic. I would argue it's maybe come across the last 2 or 3 Champions League campaigns. I think there has been a growth. I think taking the Dortmund result out of it this season, I think the new format has suited Celtic. The fact only 12 teams drop out of the new format, I think it suited them. I think it's inarguable that there's been a growth. The challenge now is you've set a bar. It's about now going and sustaining it. And I think the way that you have to do that is to have a stronger depth in squad. I think you have to have a bench. But that was a really good point, that 2 subs last night, I had noticed it too. You think you have to have something else there if you're wanting to go and make an impression on the Champions League and continue to hold it together in a domestic sense, and Celtic will never be allowed not to still be lording it above everyone else in Scotland. I think you do need a bigger pool. I think you need to have a strength in depth there.
From that Champions League, just before we leave it, I'm now looking at it, and Feyenoord have upset the apple cart. Certainly, Club Brugge have managed to do that. I wonder, do you see Bayern Munich as a potential winner, or is there someone there that's going to scupper Harry Kane's idea of finishing the season off and saying to every Arsenal fan, by the way, I've got a Bundesliga and I've got a Champions League winners medal?
I think they've got fallibilities. I think they've got fallibilities defensively, and I don't think they've got the best manager either. And that's really important when it comes to little things. I mean, the fact, I watched them on Saturday. I've watched them, me with Gen football, I've watched them regularly through the season. They've been really impressive in the Bundesliga. But I watched them against Leverkusen on Saturday. Leverkusen chased them on Saturday, absolutely chased them. I mean, why it was not had each, I don't know, but it's one of those games we've been at. They really, if you're watching that game, you'd have seen Leverkusen are 8 points clear. I think Bayern's big problem will be against big teams, in that they play a very high line, and big teams really love that, really exploit that. They can, you can imagine top players getting in behind them. And I say that because Feyenoord beat them 3-0 in the whatever I used to call group stage, in the league stage.
Yes.
Feyenoord beat them 3-0, and I think people will be looking at that and say, well, that's what way to beat them, but because I don't think they're really great at ball. But my long-winded point is I don't see them as likely winners. I wouldn't be surprised if they did win it because they've got quality, but they wouldn't be amongst my first choices for winning it.
But I just can't see past Real Madrid.
That's the thing. Any team's going to have to beat them. I think that's it. And I don't think it's not a shock statement or that. So it is. It's going to be, but
only because they've got the best manager. For me, he's one of the. For me, he's
the best Real Madrid manager too, if you know what I mean.
Well, he's not only. Yeah, absolutely.
He understands.
He's one of the greatest managers in the history of the Champions League.
Absolutely, and they've just built on a great season last year. They're still, again, it goes back to what we were talking about Celtic. It's about building on something you've got and just sustaining it and keeping it going and doing that on a consistent basis. And they do that. They consistently, and he as a manager consistently grinds that out.
I do think I think Bayern Munich can play better. I felt as though last night there was they came across as maybe just being a bit complacent. I'm just thinking, job done at Celtic Park. I think we'll meander through this tie now. I think Bayern Munich looked as though they could still go through the gears last night, but Real Madrid would probably be my shout. Can
you imagine being a Real Madrid fan and you just go into the stadium every year demanding the Champions League? They could. They don't. La Liga, yeah, nice. Just win the Champions League.
I know. Don't really turn up either.
We saw that in London, Peter. We were sitting in London at the last Champions League, and we just sat. I was sitting there with my coffee, just looking all across at this massive Real Madrid fan. Say, wouldn't it be great that every summer you're just saying, well, where are we booking for the Champions League final? And when,
do you genuinely get the same high out of it, though, if you're doing it every single year and it becomes they probably are at home miserable if they drop a point at any time,
I don't think they're going Ryanair, but I do think they're booking ahead of time, do you not?
See, you're talking about that, though. I always remember I went to the Bernabeu years ago with my son and his mate and for a wee treat. And we got a real Scottish game. Real Madrid beat Seville 7-3. Ronaldo gets a hat-trick. Benzema got 2. Gareth Bale got 2. And Rakitic of Seville was man of the match. That's how well he played. And when we were watching it, and in front of us was the Real Madrid season ticket holders, and they were given the whole game. They just gave Ronaldo pelters.
for 7-2.
Yeah, scored the hat-trick. The 1-7-3. It was one of the games, and they just and Andy, who's a Rangers supporter, turned around to me say, and Ali Celtic supporters turned around to me say, "Wouldn't it be great to spend your week giving Ronaldo pelters?"
It does sum it up. It's
On the back of a hat-trick.
On the back of it.
It's the mentality of it. It's just absolutely superb. Yeah, I think the general consensus, if anybody's going to have to win the Champions League, they're going to have to get past Real Madrid. What do you think about that? Give us your thoughts on it as well. Lots more to talk about in the Journos. I think it's more than worthy of giving us considerable time to discuss the Champions League. Give us your eventual winner if you can. On a sadder note, and the Journos is all about, all of us week in, week out, coming in here, having a bit of banter, having a chat about things which is just slightly different off the beaten track from maybe the way a footballer looks at it. And down through the years in PLZ soccer, I have had the great opportunity to have the likes of a Moira Gordon, have the likes of a Michael Grant or a Stephen McGowan, and lots of other journalists that I've called on to come and contribute to the rich tapestry of covering football. And one of them is, Patrick Barclay. The sad passing of him brought back some really good memories for me, because some of Patrick's family members and friends had phoned me and said, "Look, Patrick's doing a book on Sir Matt Busby, and I've given him your name because you know the area of Lanarkshire, and he wants to research Sir Matt Busby down at Moss End and Bells Hill and, Lithuanian backgrounds, wants to chat to a few people. Could he come and touch base with you?" And that started up a kind of not a friendship, because it's like the Davy Provan line. There are no friends, it's acquaintances. Okay, Davy. It's a great line. But it started up a kind of a help with him and a contact. And Patrick was finishing the book eventually, and he came on the programme and talked about Sir Matt Busby and the book itself, which was a brilliant read. And then, of course, he came back on when we had the full week down at Wembley for the build-up to England versus Scotland, and he came on with Alex McLeish. And I realised why he was a Sky TV pundit as well, because he just added something that I think, to your eternal credit, in the written game anyway, I always admire journalists who can open a door to a thought process that you haven't thought about yourself. And Patrick was one of those people. He's sadly passed away at the age of 77, and I think shocked our industry, Hugh.
Absolutely. In fact, it shocked me he was 77, because I always thought, because he had that very much young aspect to him. Because part of the young aspect to him was the brightness, the ability to accept new ideas. And one of the things that maybe marked that generation was very closed to outsiders. Paddy Bartley wasn't that. Paddy Bartley was incredibly welcoming to people. I didn't know him very well. The only time I kind of met him was at big matches. I know he had really close friends in Scotland, particularly Alan Patullo. They shared the Dundee passion.
That was the bit they still stayed enthusiastic about football even after years of following Dundee.
Yes.
But the thing I found about him was, yes, his insight into football. What I loved about him, and I tried to engender, and I think I tried to engender in myself, was a passion for football, and that thing to be grateful to be doing what we're doing. And sometimes I can lose sight of that when you're trying to find Wi-Fi at Armadale or something like that, or even worse, Vienna. But you can lose that. But he always had the passion, of gratitude. And the other thing as well is he knew football is important. Now we know it's not life. There's bigger things in our lives as we sit on this couch. All of us have bigger things in our lives, but that's not to dismiss football. Football can be dismissed by some people. Oh, it's just the toy department. It's that. It's not. It's much more important than that to people. It's about community. It's about joining in with people. It's about joy. It's about sadness. It's about hope, despair. And he knew that as well. And so he invested himself in it. So it's one of these guys who, when he passes, you say, yeah, I wish I knew him better. And that's the best style as you can give anybody, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a great tribute to him. I mean, I looked back at his, rightly the plaudits that were coming in from fellow journalists, and the obituary itself, started at the Dundee Evening Telegraph, 20 years at the Guardian, which is no mean feat, 6 years at the Observer, pundit on Sky. He was in a short period at Today newspaper, remember that one? The Independent, the Sunday Telegraph, the Times, the Evening Standard. So it gives you an indication of the standard of paper that he was working for, and of course the quality of his work is unrivalled when you start looking at so many people who paid tribute to him. He wrote 4 books. Busby was one, Jose Mourinho, Alex Ferguson, and of course one about the Arsenal manager Herbert Chapman. So I think most of the people who are connected to Patrick will understand exactly what Hugh said. He had a real passion for it. The Dundee thing is great, Moira, because as you know, I mean, I love the fact that a true Dundee fan can talk about them winning the title, can talk about Alan Gilzean with authority. What more can you ask for?
That's it. And he would never tire of talking about Alan Gilzean either, That's the thing. It wasn't just a token gesture that, when I was 6 I liked Dundee or I had a strip. He was passionate about his club, and he was passionate, even when he moved down south, he was passionate about Scottish football, which again, some people move away and feel that they're maybe outgrown Scottish football or they've moved to a step up. He never felt that about Scottish football or about the Scottish football, industry here. He was still highly respectful as well as highly respected, and I think he had huge gravitas. But it was interesting you saying that he always, remained grateful to do the job. But I remember him saying to me, be grateful, never lose that joy for it, never stop being a fan, but always remember you've earned the right to be here, and you've earned the wages and the right to be sitting doing. So it's this thing that people think you do this job and you should be grateful and you should do it for nothing. It's like, no, it's hard work. And it's like, he was very, firm in that assessment that, be grateful that you're doing a job you love, but it is a job. So always know your worth as well, so that bosses don't think, oh, you're getting sent there, why are you complaining about having to work 14-hour days? Or he was really astute in that way as well. So it was a great way of being professional but still being a fan of the game, which is sometimes a hard balance, but he performed it brilliantly.
Yeah, I mean, it's strange actually, sometimes he was born in London, which is something I didn't know at the time.
Either,
and I think at 4 they ended up coming up to Scotland, to Dundee. I wonder if they put a pin in the map and thought, right, Dundee it is. It'll be a twist of the family connection and the family tree.
You like the Beano.
Yeah, absolutely. Or maybe that's where the work,
Jam, whichever one it was.
That's where the work is, and that's where we're going. But from there, he was absolutely, and I'm glad you mentioned Alan Patillo, because they do have that connection, that love of Dundee. But a few people, will look back with great sadness. One of the things that I did mention, you guys were talking about how they can open a door. When Patrick was in talking about the need to write the book on Sir Matt Busby, it's because he'd looked at Ferguson, and what he did was he said, listen, I'm writing this book to give you an indication of what the qualities Sir Matt Busby had, from building the Man United side, first of all, to the Munich disaster, to having to build it again. But he almost, in a strange sort of way, by writing the Ferguson book, had been able to flip it back and say the reason why Ferguson had such a good blueprint is because Matt Busby's side was like that. It was like good goalkeeper, solid centre halves, a bit of flair out in the wings, to get the crosses in for the little bits of gold dust you have, and to have, I say little bits of gold dust, to have Law Best and Charlton's not bad, is it?
Yes, well, when you consider strength and depth,
yes,
might add a bit.
Absolutely.
I didn't know Patrick Barclay at all, I have to say. I know him only from a distance and through his work. But I loved reading him, I liked listening to him, but I have to say that I don't have any personal connection with him at all. But I always think, like Moira made a good point, that I think sometimes we can be a bit patronising about Scottish football, particularly if you've been and left, and I still think there's an element of journalists who go and make it a big paper. You go down south, I think there can be a kind of pat in the head to Scottish football, and I think he didn't come across that way. I think his affection for Dundee is genuine. I think anybody that keeps their season ticket for 1 or 2 games a season, you're either a glutton for punishment, but there's certainly an authenticity about your connection to it, an emotional connection to it.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because, again, it's just the devil in me, Ali, as you know. But as soon as you started saying there, some people go down and they forget the roots, right? I can just hear it's the type of thing on Radio Clyde when we used to do Super Scoreboard where Davy Provan would jump in your line and go, name names. Come on, what are you talking about?
Generalisation.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll let you off the hook. Don't worry about it. But no, you're absolutely right. And you always, I don't know about you, but is it a Scottish mentality? I just love to see people from Scotland go down and do well. You do, don't you? You do.
It's
There's a pride.
Aye, but it's far beyond football, If you look at, you just have to look at politics, cabinet members in successive governments over the years, science, all types of sport, literature. I mean, you just got a Scottish writer, attempting to write the great London novel, and Andrew O'Hagan. It's. I think it's because we could do a programme on it, but there is a great energy in Scotland, and there was a great energy being the smaller, the underdog was to literally invade England, because that's where the land where there's greater opportunities. Because
I agree. That line that you mentioned there, Hugh, I'll take it to its absolute simplistic stage. We are a nation that, you mentioned the underdog. We are a nation that thinks to itself, even if we're shite on this show, we're voting for you. And I'm picking up the phone going, Michelle McManus, brilliant singer, I'm voting so she'll win to get it right up them. Is that
fair?
fair?
People with their talent shows who don't sound, or you don't realise they came from Scotland, suddenly turn up in a kilt the second week and their votes go up.
That's the nation, isn't it? We're just like that.
I'm just a flashback to Opportunity Knocks came in there. And it came. There's a guy for this here. What was his name? The wee guy, mother of mine.
Neil Reid.
Neil Reid.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where did that come in?
I know.
Before your time.
Well, listen, with all due respect, for anybody of a certain vintage, that's the time when your mum used to say, by the way, if you want to change your channel, you need to get up and change it. And there are only 3 of them. So if you want to look up Neil Reid, you'll know the song he's talking about. Just on that point, and I'm talking about Scots down south, that you want to see do well. I was at the Merseyside derby, Moira. It wasn't a patch on a Celtic Rangers game. Obviously, they don't have a 400-year-old religious war to fall back on. But
just to add some spice to it.
It wasn't a patch. But by the way, I mean, David Moyes. I mean, I always think of that song, The Man Who Can't Be Loved, because he's loved at Everton. My God, when he came back. And the transformation, short period of time, not only is a short remit, Moira, keep them in the league.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. People say don't go back, don't bring somebody back to a club that's a legend, and you thought, genuinely, such a good guy that you were actually just thinking, please don't let this be one of the ones that you go back and it doesn't work out. Don't undermine that status that you had. And as you say, there's a real reverence for him down there. People love him. So to see him go back and be getting the upturn and the results that he's getting just now are fantastic. It couldn't happen to a better Evertonian, as it were, having him there.
Moira, it was great because, you know what I loved about it? We got tickets for the Everton end. And we're in there, and the one thing that I loved the fact that they came out to the Z Cars theme. And for people of a certain vintage, look up Z Cars. To see a team come out to an old 1960s police TV programme. But then the ultimate end for him, I just said, please, 41 wins apiece. Don't let David Moyes suddenly be on the end of a Merseyside defeat in the last game at Goodison.
That's it. No, it was a perfect sign-off to have him back there and to not lose that game and to, continue the upturn. Everything was there and the feel-good was there. And to be fair, I'm not going to miss the press box because I remember being at a derby down there years ago, and it's a really long press box, but there's one entrance into it, and it's old school where I think it was built for people that were like 5'4". Yes. So you're all tucked up with your knees up round your ears, virtually trying to type. And if the one person that comes in, there's a seat left for them at the end, and people are protected with their seats. So instead of just budging along one seat, you literally were up on the stand itself, teetering along, trying to get to a seat, and it was crazy. You were having to be there 2 hours before the match just to make sure you weren't doing a tightrope walk. It was mad.
Moira, I hate to be an old aficionado here, but it is actually looks as if the two of them are modelled on Ibrox is the exact same. It's the exact same replica of the old stand, and I'm loath. I stand to be corrected, you, but Archibald Leach designed one of the stands. So, and I think it's reminiscent of Ibrox, only with probably less room. But it was a great spectacle and a great way for the Evertonians to celebrate with what an equaliser. He's just roofed it, and then a full-scale fight. That's my idea of a great. That's my idea of a great game.
Match.
Yeah.
That's why everyone tunes in.
And
to
by the
Derby.
way,
That's why
every
people watch.
journalist down south, whether they were on the television, Ali, or whether they were writing about it the next day, I was reading them all, and they were like, great, a punch up at the end as well. No quarter given, fights, tackles.
And
you name it.
no parliamentary inquest.
Honestly, I'm glad you said that because that's exactly what I said, and no call for a government law.
I think that's where you find the difference between broadcast journalism and written journalism at times like that. When there's a full-scale stramash like that at the end, you'll have the commentators going, oh, this is terrible, nobody likes to see this. As journalists are going, yes, and every fan, exactly.
I were watching.
I always say the greatest thing in a football match is a person in the same team fighting each other. That is the greatest thing. A guy fighting with a teammate.
Yes.
If every game could end with a guy fighting with his own mate, I'd go home happy.
Yes.
I mean, it's like the ice hockey this week when Canada played USA. After 9 seconds, there'd been 3 fights. And the great thing about ice hockey is the referees allow the fights to go on until somebody hits the ground, then they break it up.
Yes,
And I
yeah.
thought, I could, could be doing with that in Scottish junior football.
Yeah, although I have to, because of the nature of life nowadays and how people are upset at anything, we're not condoning fighting at football matches.
No, we're just-
basically, we like to write about it.
Just
There are
recommend.
rarely real punches thrown anyway. It's more about like flapping. But that's when it's teammates. It's always funny because you get the rest of the team coming, and normally they'll barrel in to help their teammate. But when it's two of them against each other, like, right, wait a minute, now we're having to take sides here. Who are we stopping?
Which brings me nicely, Moira, to the fact that next week I'll do the top 10 punch-ups between players who played for the same team. That's a great one. We'll talk about that next week. Just before we go, we've got a couple of topics that I want to get your thoughts on, guys, because obviously I thought it was right to pay tribute to Patrick Barclay, and again, great for what David Moyes is doing. It's a story that will unfold in a fantastic new stadium, Hugh. I mean, honestly, we drove past it, and I've been watching it constantly when I go down to Liverpool on a regular basis to see it evolve. Wow. I mean, I think Everton, just as a footnote to this, will be a major force in English football.
No reason not to, because they've got the rep. They've now got the size of stadium to fund that, and I've got the manager. And a wee footnote to Dave Moyes, I watched a bit of Crystal Palace v Everton, and I saw the interviews after. And Beto, who you can rearrange a sentence including banjo, cows behind, right? Should not. Suddenly comes up and has a really neat finish. And you say, oh, well, he's got a bit of confidence in Beto afterwards, was talking about the manager. Just that one thing. Oh, I feel I can score every week. He's the same guy as he was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Same technical skill, and he scores a winner. And that is management.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to be said for just putting your arm around someone and trying to get the best out of them. And Moira, I have to do that every week with Ali, and then she just goes out on the pitch and performs.
We need an HR
Performs at elite
department in
level.
here.
So, it's all down to you, is it?
No, it's down to her. But every now and then I say, look, Ali, come on, get out there and win the game for us.
You need to do that for Peter next week then.
I really wish you could. Just on that, we're talking about Scottish people voting for songs. I do read. I don't know about you guys, but I'm a hoarder. Are you a hoarder for memorabilia?
Certain bits and pieces. To be fair, when we moved house a few years ago, we were a bit
cull.
more. Yeah, it was like not a big cull at that point, but there was a
I'm
lot
not a
of stuff
holder
that
at all. I
was.
can't stand
No,
holding.
my wife would empty all my memorabilia and sell it, Hugh, in a heartbeat. But I used to collect, right in the sequence every month, 442.
Aye.
I had all of them up to 1 to 100, and then you kind of lose your way when other things come into your
Get a
pathway.
girlfriend.
Yeah, and a wife. and a daughter. It just kills
Not all
off.
at the
It
same
kills.
time,
It
surely.
kills off your income. You can't buy 442. So I still read it online, Hugh. And they did a top. I think it was something like top 40 songs written for football. Now it obviously has an English bias, so I kind of rejigged it a little bit, but. I was thinking of some of the songs that have been released in the charts that have been the good ones. You want me? I'll give you 10, and then if you want to add anything in that I've forgotten about, fine. But this is where this is my kind of a top 10 songs. One or two of them are crap, but I think they're worthy of a mention. Okay, Three Lines is just a fantastic song. I mean, it is a
pop song.
It's a great pop song, and also if you were there at the time when the Scottish fans are singing Rockin' All Over the World, but they're singing Three Lines because it's written for them with, the guy from the Lightning Seeds and Badil and Skinner. World in Motion for me.
I like World
is-
in
I
Motion.
do like that. That was it.
I mean, World in Motion's
That's
great.
one of the credible ones. That's
Is it?
definitely,
You can get up on the floor and dance to that.
That's it, no.
And John Barnes is brilliant in it.
yeah.
You know, as a rap. In contrast, the Anfield rap is crap, but it's still in my top 10. Just because I'm a Liverpool fan, I thought I'd sneak it in there. So, Carnaval de Paris, Ali, for the World Cup, 98. I thought it typified
I
what it
don't
was
know
about.
what it is. I just think I'm so sick of hearing it. Like you hear it everywhere. Like I've been hearing it since 1998 at like Stenhousemuir and everywhere you go.
Did they play it at Stenhouse
Play it
News?
everywhere.
Wow, where's the
play
link
it.
there,
I
Hugh?
just think you've
Can you
heard-
do that as a follow-up in the Daily Mail?
I think I'm sick of hearing it.
Right, okay. We Have a Dream.
To be fair, I still love that one. I think that's nostalgia. I just love that because when you were back at that age and it was the era of like footballers appearing on top of the pops and things like that. The whole thing was bonkers.
They were all pissed on
Yeah,
top
that's
of the
what was
pops.
brilliant. You could tell it. Not as a kid you couldn't, but now
And
you're
two
looking
of,
back.
Two of
That's
the members,
brilliant.
one of the members of the England squad and one of the members of the Scotland squad, who shall remain nameless, ended up getting
Name
off,
names.
getting off with the two girls from Tight Fit. That's all I'm saying.
One of them might be a colleague of PLZ.
Honestly, a journalist who cannot keep your own counsel. Unbelievable, you. But We Have a Dream. And he's handing the ball to me. I mean, who puts that lyric in? That's not Lennon and McCartney. That's
that-
B.A. Robertson.
I remember that as well. This summer driving across to Germany and we'd gone via the ferry to Amsterdam and it was like full of Scots. And in the bar, that was all getting sung as the cars were all piling off. It was a mix of Yes or We Can Boogie and that getting blared out of stereos and cars. You thought people in Amsterdam were just thinking, what on earth was arriving in? But it was all people singing it, and it was always the most enthusiastic. And he's handing the ball to me.
That's a great line, isn't it, Hugh? It's brilliant.
It's not the ball you're kicking, the idiot. It's me.
Exactly. And the fact that Moira knows it off by heart.
Totally.
You
We
know?
sang it. That's all
It's
summer.
quality. And the other thing, Hugh, which obviously the two ladies were not old enough to remember, but there was a time, Hugh, when you and I looked and thought to ourselves, you know what, we're going to win this World Cup. And Andy Cameron's going to get to number one with Ali's Tartan Army. The whole nation believed we were going to win it.
Yeah, at that time, I think it was 78 as well, there was an actual LP of Scotland songs, and I think I bought it.
I think
Yes.
we had. I think my house had
I
it.
think and one of the songs was, which it comes to me in when I can't remember my name or where I live or where I park my car, which is an unusual one, is this song, Yabba Dabba Doo.
Yes.
We support the boys in blue. And it's easy.
Yeah.
Easy.
That was a
never
1974
easy,
World
surely.
Cup song. It was a brilliant song, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, these things are magic. I mean, there are songs that I think you associate. Blowing Bubbles,
Yeah.
West Ham, which is fine. Anfield Rap, which was terrible, but terribly funny. When I was a kid, I loved Chelsea's song Blue is the Colour.
Blue is the colour. Chelsea is the name.
Yeah.
Some all together.
Football
is a game.
Yeah.
I think it sounds like a match of the day type. It's just
It
that
really
you imagine
is,
people
Moira.
with football rattles and their
yeah.
granny knitted their scarf.
And then the last two are just
encapsulated.
typical of a nation that does not relate to people from London, Spurs are on their way to Wembley. Aussie's team for the FA Cup, which is just horrendous. And then, nice one, Cyril, which the Rangers fans have adopted for Cyril Dessers when he scores a goal.
But fans did generally, use them. I mean, there's the actual other genre of pop songs used for
football songs.
And people actually now forget the originals because years of like Pilots, it's Magic and all that.
Yes.
It's continued down the years, but people would say, well, where did that song actually come from? I mean, more famous ones like Hey Jude, that was a very famous one, the Terraces, where he would,
Yeah.
And then Hare Krishna for Harry Hood, remember? Oh, Hare. People don't forget that.
I think it was just trailed off like the guy sitting
There wasn't really any verse in it, it was just a main chorus.
It was just the Hare Krishna thing. It was a very strange time then where you could have Top of the Pops, where you could have something like David Bowie on, and then you could have the Wurzels following them, and then you could have Terry Wogan following that, and then have the Clash, and then you could have... We'll just
Imagine
finish.
that green room at the back with all those mics, and it must be something.
We'll just finish off with the Hare Krishna chant from the local Buddhist sect.
Yeah. Moira, imagine having the World Cup squad with Tight Fit still in the room as well. It just beggars belief. I finish on one line which I had to laugh at last week, not because I'm blowing them completely out of the water for their... how can I put it? For the integrity of what they're trying to do. But a group of people are wanting Tommy Burns canonised, and they want him as Saint Tommy Burns. Now, I've spoken to a number of his teammates, and because I knew Tommy really well, we all laughed heartily and said, if Tommy was alive, he would be laughing non-stop, saying, right, from now on, hey, Martin, I want you to call me Saint, right? That would be it. He'd just have a laugh at it. The integrity and the thought process behind it, because of the great work he done, is great. But I'm not too sure whether it's going to get any great mileage. But
If it can happen to a Liverpool player, surely it can happen to a Celtic player, though. I mean, Ian St John.
Yeah. I was wondering where you were going to go with that.
I used to love all that. I'm old enough to know the Ian St John stories, and there's always, the Liverpool humour. We're talking about chants and that, and we used to be the well-known one in Liverpool would be that, you're walking past an evangelical church and it would say, Jesus saves, and underneath it, St John scores a rebound.
Yes, yeah. But Tam would have loved it, wouldn't he? He would have just laughed his head off, not in a dismissive, derogatory way. He would have just found great fun and humour in it, St Tommy Burns, which I thought that, I looked at it this week and I thought there was a Moira. Who knows? I can, unless somebody's going to correct me, I don't think any calls will come for journalists to be made saints. And
I think if there was any calls, there would soon be a laughter straight after it. I don't think many.
Absolutely. I've thoroughly enjoyed the chat with Moira, Alison and Hugh. Hopefully you've enjoyed our chat and the topics we discussed today. Usually we try and look at what's immediate this week and then some of the things that catch your eye that we can talk about. If you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel as always. And if you want to get all the breaking news, you can download the app and get it all at your fingertips. It's as simple as that. The support for the Journos programme has been absolutely superb. The figures have been brilliant and we really are appreciative of your support. So don't forget to download it on the podcast. A lot of people are telling us they're listening to it while they're out walking or maybe walking 4 miles in their fitness campaign. I don't know who I'm talking about there, but I'm going to keep my own counsel so that nobody knows who I'm talking about. From Hugh, from Moira, from the runner Alison and myself, Peter Martin. Thanks for listening and watching.